All right, so before we waste any more time, we want to make sure we get this out. Send us new intros.
Don't we have a bunch of intros? I thought we had a bunch of new ones.
But we haven't recorded yet, so there's still a window to get some new intros.
Did we record intros like 6 months ago?
No.
It's been a year?
It's been over a year, dude. Corey.
Remember Corey came here, where we are now.
Yeah.
Recorded a bunch of intros.
Yeah.
You're saying that was a year ago.
That was 2014.
Oh, no way.
Yes.
That's impossible.
No.
No, it wasn't.
It was.
That was like 8 months ago.
No, it was 2014.
We're doomed. Are you serious?
Yes.
Remember, he was sitting here. We were trying to find a line.
2014. It's been about 18 months.
I hate everything. Are you serious?
Yes.
There was no effing way.
Oh my goodness! Do I have to double check this?
Yes, I want you to. Okay, I want you to double check. Because I'm telling you, it is not 2014. He was here like 6 to 8 months ago.
It was in April of 2014.
That's like 2 years ago.
Yes.
That's not true.
It was April of 2014.
It's like, yeah.
I know. This is what happens.
I hate everybody.
My daughter is 3. She's 3.
Freaking kid.
She's 3. She talks. She bosses me around.
Does she still love Peppa Pig?
Loves Peppa Pig. You know what else she loves? Is the new animated series from the same team that created Peppa Pig. All the same voice
talent.
Cow?
Is it Cuckoo Cow?
No, it's not. It's Ben and Holly's Magic Kingdom, which is about Ben, who's an elf, and Holly, who's a fairy. And they're best friends.
What kind of fairy? You mean like a...
Like a fairy, like a little girl with wings. Okay? And they're best friends. And Ben, but Holly flies, so when Ben wants to fly around with Holly, he gets on the back of his pet ladybug named Gaston, and they fly around. And Gaston's like a dog. And if you ask my daughter, if you say, and what does Gaston say? She goes, because Gaston's like a little dog.
So the show's a documentary? Is that what you're saying?
It's a sweet animated show. It's hilarious. It's great. It's on Nick Jr. There's a plug for Nick Jr. So anyway, gods@digigods.com. Send us Vox boxes, send us listener mail, and send us those intros. We still got a little bit of time. We have to schedule Corey to sit down and record them, and which we will get around to. And we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's and getting our act together for 2016. And Mark, I forgot to ask you, did you have any New Year's resolutions, or do you not do that?
I don't really do that. However, I've never lost the weight I lost from 2013.
Yeah. See?
Because, last week you ate the last of my ice cream.
Yeah.
Which means I have no ice cream and I have no baked goods in the house.
Uh-huh.
Because I realized that I think I can lose weight faster if I cut out sugar, flour, and something.
Okay.
Sugar, flour, white sugar, flour,
okay,
and dairy.
And dairy.
Yes. If you try to minimize those three, I'll have a lot easier time losing weight. So that's my New Year's resolution, is to lose some weight.
You feel like the Oscar thing has died down any? Have we?
Well, we're still waiting for like the next gigantic celebrity to say, "I'm not going."
Well,
because you know what it is, I think cooler heads are starting to prevail. It's not becoming this whole op-ed thing anymore. People are realizing that the individual Academy member is not some horrible racist who hates black people. It's just not happening, and that the hiring needs to change. You need to give African Americans the spots that they deserve on these movies,
and Asians in particular. I mean, look,
I
wrote. There you go. I wrote a thing for the LA Times 15 years ago when Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was on its big rampage to hopefully win an Oscar, and I wrote a thing, and I admit it. I wrote it basically to guilt the Academy into, or at least that branch in particular, the people who saw the film, into voting for it, to give it an Oscar, which worked. I don't know how much I played in that, but it was an LA Times piece. It got pretty well profiled. And the point that I made was Asian films have been screwed by the Academy for decades. You go all the way back. There were when the Board of Governors in the 1950s were voting a special award to a foreign film every year. The Board of Governors picked 2 Japanese movies out of 5 years. And then they created the the category. They created and the committee, and then once suddenly it's no longer the board of governors voting, but it's just a bunch of old people who have the time to see all the submitted films. Then suddenly you go literally a half a century with no Asian film actually winning the award. A bunch of Japanese films nominated, some Chinese films nominated, but none of them ever won the award. Kurosawa only won it for a Russian film. So it's sort of added insult to injury, and then you've got Jennifer Jones and Mickey Rooney playing all these stereotypical Asians in Hollywood movies. In any case, so I already called attention to that, but let's look at all the Asians that have won Academy Awards as actors. There's almost none.
Well, here's the thing, though. But when you talk about African American actors, you're talking about they're reacting to decades of racism and civil rights era and Hattie
it's
McDaniel.
Totally different dynamic. And I think they've done better in the last 10 years than at any other time. But again, it's like suddenly when you had multiple black nominees for about 10, 12 years, and then 2 years where there aren't any. It's people pay attention to that. I will say this: I loved what Idris Elba said, where he talked specifically about he used to read scripts that were calling for a character that was specifically black, but then there's this other character that the race isn't named, but he's got a twinkle in his eye, and he said, "Well, I've got a twinkle in my eye." I thought, bravo, right on, dude, for sure.
Now that's like okay, Idris Elba, right?
Yeah,
commanding, handsome actor. He would kick ass as James Bond. If they made him James Bond, I'd be first in line. That guy's awesome.
Although it's really funny. Tim disagrees with us.
Really?
Yeah. Tim is awesome. He's like, James Bond's a white guy. He goes, you give him, you don't have to change.
And Tim, by the way, is African American.
Yeah, he is. Tim's black, but Tim feels like that, you can create great parts that black actors can play. You don't have to take a character who's white and make him black, and I get that. Yaphet Kotto was saying the same thing. So I think that's an interesting divide because I would love to see him play Bond. I think we've changed so much about Bond already. Like Bond used to be a 1960s era Cold Warrior. Now he's, a post-Cold War guy. We've invented a whole new backstory for him. Honestly, so many different actors have played him. He's been played by an Australian, a Scotsman, two Irishmen. I'm sorry, but no, we don't have to adhere to anything anymore.
But that's true. But regarding Idris Elba, I believe
He'd kill it.
He would. That guy's great. I believe that the reason why he was not nominated was because I'm just telling you, the Academy is not going to reward a TV movie.
True.
It's a Netflix film. They don't want to open up that door.
Well,
that suddenly Netflix films.
No,
even if they wind up getting a week in a theater just for the qualifying run, it's basically a Netflix pickup, and that's it. They don't want to open that door.
And it also, there was a controversy with that film about collapsing windows. That Netflix was going to put it on Netflix very quickly after it had a theatrical release. There were a lot of issues, and Netflix also overpaid for that film. They paid like $12 million. And everybody else was really mad about that because they kind of felt like, okay, now you're totally blowing out the game. We go to these festivals, and you have a movie where the minimum guarantee is going to be in the ballpark of $3, $4, maybe $5 million tops, and everybody's kind of bidding, and you're waiting to see where we're going to settle, and then suddenly Netflix walks in with their big fat wallet and says, "We'll pay 12." That's like if you're bidding on a house that's only worth like $200,000. And people are all kind of bidding in the, the 150, 160, 170 range. Everybody's hoping they can get it for under $2. And then Netflix walks in and says, "We'll pay $3 million." Well, and that pisses people off because now they're pushing the rate of everything out of the realm of anybody's possibility. Now all these other little movies are going to walk into film markets thinking, "Hey, maybe we can get Netflix to pay 9 times the amount for the film."
And then what's going to happen is, hopefully not, but what might happen is they overpay for stuff. They don't do well. Netflix is a private company. They keep their numbers private.
Yeah.
You don't really know how many people necessarily watch that film on Netflix.
Nope.
But let's say it didn't do well. They may go, you know what, next year I'm not going to spend $12 million on a movie next year.
Yeah.
Because Beast didn't do well.
True.
And then just when you thought that market was inflating, it's going to come right back down.
True. Anyway. But you know what, Ice Cube was very sanguine about the whole thing too. They asked him, he said, "Look, man, we made the movie for a little bit of money, and it made a lot of money, and people loved it, and it won some awards, and that's fine. Not getting nominated for Best Picture." He goes, "That's like, it's like being upset that your birthday cake doesn't have enough frosting on it. It's like, just be happy with, You go to the track, you get a ticket, your horse comes in, and great. If not, then you tear up the ticket and you go home." And I thought, there's a guy who's like totally got the right perspective on all this.
Or he's pretending to have the right perspective. Because who knows in the cold hard light of day what he thinks? Because you know what, the only nomination that film got was for a bunch of white guys.
Yeah, but you know what? But you know what? Ride Along it made a ton of money, and Ride Along 2 is making a ton of money. He's happy.
Well, he has to be magnanimous because he's a producer.
True.
He is in the business. I mean, he's a successful producer, so he can't be suddenly alienating financiers, actors, below-the-line people by saying, F the Oscars.
Exactly.
So he's smart,
All right, let's get into Blu-rays and DVDs and stuff. I got some cult films here. Arrow releasing. Arrow Video is a cult distributor that releases through music video distributors, MVD. And we got a couple here from the Arrow line. They've been getting a lot of really cool stuff out there. Just arch cult stuff that has been on the "we want this out there" list for the longest time, and they're just pumping them out there right now. Louise Lasser shows up in Blood Rage. Blood Rage is a just relentless, kind of cheesy, but thoroughly enjoyable 1983 slasher film, right from the middle of the perfect slasher era. Apparently it didn't get released until 1987. I didn't see it until they sent us this thing. Never even heard of it until they sent us this thing. But you know what? It's right from that era. It totally belongs there. It's a perfectly good slasher film from the middle of that era. Very, very low budget, which makes it even better. And this is its Blu-ray debut. So welcome to Blu-ray Blood Rage. Louise Lasser is in it along with a bunch of people that you never heard of, and that's perfectly fine. It's got some interesting extras, Blu-ray and DVD. It's got a second Blu-ray on here, which has Nightmare at Shadow Woods, which is the same film, but re-edited for 1987 theatrical release with additional footage that was not in the original version. So, it's kind of a nice little chunk of slasher film history with Blood Rage. And then the other Arrow release this week is Requiescent, directed by Carlo Lazzani. This is a spaghetti western, a very unusual spaghetti western from 1967. With a totally bizarre cast. I mean, this is just the strangest movie. This has been out of print actually for quite a while, and it's also been known under the title Kill and Pray, with some releases. Anyway, it was co-written by Pasolini, Pier Paolo Pasolini, the late Italian neorealist director who made the infamous Salo, who also shows up in the movie playing Don Juan. And essentially, it's about a kid whose family is slaughtered, and he's raised by a preacher to be a non-violent kid. But years later, he is given the opportunity to get revenge for his family's death, and they drags him back into the life. It's it's one of those forgiveness and redemption and very, very Catholic guilt movies that wind up every so once in a while being imposed on the Western genre, especially in spaghetti westerns. In any case, Carlo Lazzani, not a director that I'm terribly familiar with, but very competent work here. Also stars Mark Damon in the cast. Mark Damon, who shows up in a lot of B movies from the 60s and would go on to establish a really kind of a mega house B-movie production company, Mark Damon Worldwide, which if you go to the American film market, it's just like there's Mark Damon stuff everywhere. It's all over the place.
No relation to Matt.
No relation to Matt. None whatsoever. But anyway, Requiescent, which has a ton of special features in here. It's a beautiful restoration of the film right from the camera negative, 2K transfer here. And there's a thing on here called Remembering Requiescent, which is a new interview with Lou Castel, one of the stars of the film. And an archival interview with Carlo Lazzani, which is very interesting. So, and of course, a great booklet. So, two really cool things from Arrow. And then a few other cult films. I'll get through real quickly. We've got the Trauma release, the last horror film, otherwise known as Fanatic, which has, strangely enough, some Depeche Mode music in it, but it's really only interesting because Carolyn Monroe is in it. Carolyn Monroe, an 80s-era science fiction kind of Barbarella-type star from movies like Star Crash, and I just adore Carolyn Monroe, and any movie from the 80s that she's in, I will tolerate on some level. In any case, this is another slash and gore movie. Funny intro by Lloyd Kaufman, who's always just priceless. There's an audio commentary and a few other little behind-the-scenes things. It's a trauma film. What do you want? And then we got a double feature from the Scream Factory line of Shout Factory. This is The House Where Evil Dwells, along with Ghost Warrior. Neither of these are particularly great in and of themselves, but as a cheesy double feature that you want to throw in the background during a party, you could do worse. Both of these films are from the 1980s, and they have the whole 1980s B-movie sheen to them. Essentially they're samurai films. They're not great samurai films by any means. You'd have to go to the 60s and the 70s for the really, really good stuff. But Ghost Warrior, which was also known under the title Swordkill, is not terrible. It's kind of a crazy fantasy where a couple of skiers find like an ancient samurai suspended in ice. And then he winds up being brought back to life through this like weird Frankenstein process, and he becomes kind of like the samurai version of Captain America in some weird, freaky way. By the way, what do you think about the new Captain America movie with special guest star Iron Man? How's that look to you?
I'm starting to wonder if I'm getting sick of these movies. It might be happening. Although the second Captain America film was legitimately, by any measure, a good movie.
It was a very good movie.
It was.
Yeah.
So I'm a little okay. And the thing with the Civil War thing is that my hope is, and I think the Russo brothers who have proven themselves to be very smart. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're going to shy away from all the uncomfortable thematic implications of what the Civil War comic was really about. Mm-hmm. So I think that there might be something more there than just a bunch of superheroes fighting. That's the hope.
Let's hope. Another double feature, Axe, along with Kidnapped Co-Ed. These are films from Frederick R. Friedel, a 1970s era schlockmeister, kind of continuing the low-budget slasher and violence and gore and roughy traditions of the 1960s. They're not very good, but they have that weird culty sheen to them, and a few cool extras. So I mean, if you're a fan of the era, the genre, I'm sure you'll enjoy it. A couple that are a little bit more recent, Deathgasm. Honestly, I don't need to tell you anything other than the title. If a movie's called Deathgasm and you're interested in seeing it on Blu-ray, then you're going to see it. If you're
Sold.
If the title doesn't appeal to you, you're not going to like it. There's really nothing else that needs to be said. Just Deathgasm. The title sells it. Condemned. Death is the only escape. This is from the Saw vein of movies, which continues to be, some of the torture porn is, I guess, compelling from a metaphorical, allegorical standpoint. You can sort of excuse it, and some of it is just relentlessly exploitative and amateurish. This kind of sits somewhere between the two. There's always like people on drugs in these things. That's part of the way that they try to give you a cautionary tale. Don't do drugs because you might wind up being a villain in one of these movies. But anyway, there's a little bit of a zombie thing going on, a little bit of the slasher and gore and torture porn thing going on, and it's otherwise just a way to do a lot of gore effects in a very, very narrow environment. The Phantom from 10,000 Leagues is on Blu-ray. This is pretty cool. This is a 1955 film from this is out from Kino Lorber. Thoroughly enjoyable. Very much. We have other Kino Lorber stuff that we're certainly going to be talking about, but this is the one that belongs in the cult vein. This was kind of one of the original man against monster movies, right from that the early decade of the post World War II atomic scare stuff. And it was a huge, huge hit. People went to this by the droves. It was a big drive-in movie. And there's an audio commentary here from Richard Harlan Smith, film historian, as well as some trailers from hell with Joe Dante, who always loves to be a part of this world. And there it is, The Phantom from 10,000 Leagues. It's not going to blow you away with its special effects, but it's worth checking out. And then Severin, who always does some interesting culty stuff, Christopher Lee's Count Dracula from 1970. Certainly not one of the all-time legendary Dracula movies, but it's worth checking out. It's got Klaus Kinski in it. What do you want? Klaus Kinski and Christopher Lee. It's a match made in hell, I guess. Probably the best film ever directed by Jess Franco. Jess Franco mostly did just really schlocky, nudie stuff and movies about orgies and, really kind of bad swinger movies. But this one actually is like a real movie. Jess Franco actually made a real movie with a real cast for a change. Also, Herbert Lom and a few other noteworthy actors of the era show up. Not bad at all. Not bad at all. And Bruno Mattei, who edited it, also would go on to be something of a significant director from the era. And then the last few include the double feature The Dungeon Master and Eliminators. This is another Scream Factory, Shout Factory double feature from the of memorable cult films from the 1980s. Did you ever see The Dungeon Master?
Yes, I did back in the day.
It was like the same era, like Troll and a lot of those things. It kind of came from that same moment, that same supernatural moment that grew out of the slasher films. Anyway, I actually kind of enjoyed The Dungeon Master. I was like, that's surprisingly good for a schlocky, low-budget film. And Eliminators is another one of those things that's kind of grew out of the whole Mad Max and Road Warrior thing. Kind of, with a little bit of RoboCop thrown in for good measure. Not bad at all. Cheesy, but kind of enjoyable in a schlocky, nostalgic way. Zombie High, with the future Oscar nominee Virginia Madsen. It's basically about Zombie High. I mean, I don't know what you want. That's what it is. It's like zombies in high school.
You bitter, bitter man.
Women's Prison Massacre. This is a women's prison film with some massacre stuff thrown on it. What do you want? There's no other way to describe this thing. That's exactly what it is. It's an Italian slasher film from the era, taking the old Corman women's prison thing and throwing some giallo on top of it. And then lastly, one that I actually really like, despite the fact that it is a totally exploitative piece of trash, is Blood and Lace. This is a Blu-ray DVD combo set. This is from 1971. Here's the thing about Blood and Lace. Blood and Lace is one of the few that actually does have something to say, despite the fact that it is just relentlessly brutal and exploitative. It's got some interesting things about it. Gloria Graham shows up in this, as they all did, like Shelley Winters when their careers are going away. They do that. You know who else is in this? Vic Tayback and Melody Patterson. Vic Tayback from Piece of the Action. I just watched that yesterday. Did you know that? I threw it on.
Did you really?
I had Netflix on. I was like, you know what? I want to watch an episode of Star Trek. What does Netflix have? And I was going through, hey, look, season 1, season 2. What's in season 2? Season 2 is where they all play dress up through the whole season because season 2 has the
Nazi one
all
where they
that
dress
stuff.
as Nazis.
Pretty much every episode where they play dress up, it's all from season 2 because the Paramount wardrobe department said, what do we do with this stuff? Do we mothball it? And then somebody over at Desilu said, nah, let's hang on to it. We'll throw some Star Trek episodes into the wardrobe department and we'll dress you in togas and Nazi outfits and whatever we got. So the Paramount wardrobe department pretty much dictated all of season 2. So I threw on a Piece of the Action, Krakow.
And then at the end,
Oxmix.
Dr. McCoy leaves the phaser down on the planet.
Honestly, the whole
someday they're going to want a piece of our action. Dun, 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 dun. That was the music at the end. They're going to want a piece of our action. Freeze frame. Dun, 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 dun.
It's the best. Vic Tayback. He played Krakow.
That was a fun.
The Oxmix.
Well, you know what? I'm going to start a production company. I'm going to call it Fizbin Productions.
The whole Fizbin bit, except on Tuesday. Those guys are the dumbest gangsters ever. They've had 100 years to learn about Chicago gangsters from the 30s. They don't even get it close to being right. It's just horrible. And that kid who's like, oh, you'll know what to do. Ow, daddy. Ow, daddy, daddy.
Star Trek sucked. It really did. It just sucked in so many ways.
The whole thing was shot on the Paramount backlot. You just look at those brownstones that are made out of paper mache. It's the best. I love that episode. It's hysterical.
I remember, obviously, as a Star Trek fan, I revered City on the Edge of Forever. Oh, it's the best one. City on the Edge of Forever. And I remember I finally made my father see it. Yeah. And he goes, I just watched City on the Edge of Forever. He goes, it's so bad.
You know what? Because my father, who was an acting teacher. I mean, he taught major stars, Alan Ladd, and tons of them. And I remember when I was a kid, I loved Star Trek, and my father would just sit there and he just grit his teeth every single time William Shatner said anything, and he would just cringe. And he wouldn't say anything. But I could tell. I was like, why don't you like Shatner? He's the best, Captain Kirk. What's wrong? And of course, then you grow up and you're like, oh my gosh. He was so right. Like, I get it. I understand now.
Well, from a technical standpoint, Shatner may not have been what an acting teacher would want to see.
No.
But still, you can't. He's just Shatner.
He's the Shatner. Well, he just put the shat on everything.
He really did.
He laid it on. There's a game called Fizbin. Spock says, Captain, I'm very familiar with the practice, but I've never heard... No, Kirk waves him off. No, Fizbin, it's a man's game. It's probably too complicated for you. I can do anything you want, Kirk. I can learn any game you can learn.
Yeah, a little reverse psychology there. Nice.
Anyway.
All right, Wonder Years Season 4. Speaking of Star Trek, let's do some TV. Wonder Years Season 4, this might be the one you want to get because this DVD set this season includes a lot of the songs that were featured in the original broadcasts, which, of course, as you know, as Wade told you every week for 2 years, was a big deal when it came to China Beach.
Yep.
Right? Here you have Beach Boys, Marvin Gaye, Jimi Hendrix.
Incredible to me that they were able to clear all that stuff finally.
So this is
such an ordeal.
So this season 4 is definitely worth it. Otherwise, it's the same as all the other seasons of the Wonder Years, which I never really got. Final season of Hill Street Blues, finally out on DVD, not Blu-ray. This one, the show felt a little bit like it was kind of moving out. It did not get nominated for a Best Drama Emmy, which was a bit kind of like writing on the wall. The Daniel J. Travanti was still there, and Betty Thomas was still there, but still, it felt like they were introducing some new characters to put some new blood in it, and it just felt like, you guys are trying too hard. I think it's over. Duck Dynasty Wedding Special is great. It's all about the Duck Dynasty guys actually attending and giving their blessing to a gay wedding. Oh, it's not about that?
I wasn't even going to laugh at that.
That's something else?
I wasn't going to ruin the joke.
Anyway, this is...
That'd be great if it were, wouldn't it? That would be just... it'd break people's minds.
It'll break their minds.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is all about John Luke getting married to Mary Kate. And I'm really glad these Duck Dynasty guys, it's over.
Don't know their names.
It's basically over.
It is, isn't it?
Mr. Robot is out on Blu-ray. Now, Mr. Robot is a show that I swear this thing came out of nowhere, and I have never met anybody who has said anything other than... This is the greatest show I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, people went absolutely ape-s for this show.
It's kind of a fascinating phenomenon. It's rare that shows hit it so big without already being on the radar for some period of time. This is one of those. It's like because with so many shows on TV, I don't know how does something like this even get discovered.
I don't know, but you know what? USA, God love them. That's it's a good thing. And the thing is, it has Christian Slater in it.
I know,
and that's like. Lame.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, Christian Slater isn't like some new kid like people love that Orphan Black as it has Tatiana Maslany, and then she becomes kind of the it person of the day.
Yeah.
This is like Christian Slater.
I know.
From like Heathers in 1989. But you know what? Great show. People loved it. Season 1.
Just won some. Didn't it win a Golden Globe or 2 or something? I never pay attention to the Golden Globe TV things, but I think it did.
You know what? It's
Well, anyway.
Little House on the Prairie.
Good show. Yeah,
Little House on the Prairie, season 8, Wade.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying to yourself. You're saying there was 8 seasons of this crap?
Yeah, more than that. Wasn't there?
More than that, and there were little movies and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, it seemed to go on forever for the better part of my, half my life, it seemed.
It did. It's funny because on the cover of the the DVD, it says, better picture, better sound.
Okay.
Restored to broadcast length. Now, of course, it's better picture, better sound because now you're starting to get into the 80s now. So at least... You're getting some more, at least a little more modern broadcast standards in terms of shooting and whatnot. I'm sure they probably maybe found themselves with better source material.
We're not using wire recorders for the sound anymore.
This is not kinescope. We're not doing that. Yeah. So so this is season 8. No reason to get this unless you're a devotee of the other seasons. So just letting you know it's out there. Also, Party of 5. Now, Party of 5, this thing had its moment. This thing was on Fox for like 6 seasons,
and it birthed a number of actors who went on to do rather substantial work.
Well, Matthew Fox was on Lost. Nev Campbell did the Scream films. Jennifer Love Hewitt spent her time not being married to me.
Yeah,
very very sad, I have to say. So so this thing, you know what? It was set in San Francisco. It was a bunch of siblings, and they become orphans, and they gotta figure out how to take care of themselves. And this thing had a real moment. I got to say, it was a good.
Lacey Chabert was on the show too.
Lacey Chabert, who Wade, as you know, and probably don't care, Lacey Chabert was the original Meg Griffin for part of season 1 of Family Guy, and then she wound up leaving the show
because
she wanted more money.
Really?
And then they wound up hiring Mila Kunis.
No kidding.
And now Mila Kunis is incredibly wealthy because that show's been on for like 12 seasons, and Lacey Chabert is on for like one episode.
And there you go.
Wah, wah.
Well, we got a bunch of others from the Kino Lorber Studio Classics line. Some amazing stuff here. First off, The Knack and How to Get It. Long,
I love this
freaking
movie.
overdue.
It's
oh
fun.
My gosh. This is one of the best movies that Richard Lester ever made. This is from 1965, a legendary classic from the... We can technically say it's from the kitchen sink realism / angry young men period, but it's more than that. But still, it's part of that sort of British new wave from the 60s that really kind of rewrote the rules for British films going forward. And it's stylistically really daring. It's got all that funky Lester stuff that he did in the Beatles films and everything else. And eventually kind of, segued a little bit into the Three Musketeers and the Four Musketeers. It's just wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. And it showcases the comedy talents of Michael Crawford better than anything else he's ever done. Rita Tushingham, who was sort of like the British it girl for the era, has never been more wonderful. And it's really just a sexy romp through, this guy's girl craziness. And you get the whole sensibility of that period, that London of the 60s that sort of gets made fun of a lot in like the Austin Powers films. But it's just gorgeous, spectacular black and white photography, and one of the most original scores John Barry ever wrote. Really a great score. Mr. Tight Trousers, Mr. Tight Trousers. I used to show this to my class as well, and it always got like this amazing reaction. People didn't know what to make of it, which is kind of neat when you have modern audiences that you think have seen everything, especially really jaded students, and they think they're so hip and they're so cool and they're so, on top of everything. You show them something like The Knack, and they just don't even know how to process it.
You know what's funny is that in the same vein, I was the guest speaker at our friend Ray Green's LMU film class, and I got there a little bit early, and the previous class was still going. And the previous class, the professor was wrapping up a showing for the students of All About Eve.
Mm-hmm. And
I remember thinking, what are these kids going to think about something so melodramatic? There is no way they're going to like All About Eve.
Nope.
And I sort of walked outside and was watching the students as they left the theater. And, I only saw a couple of students. I didn't see all of them because there's various ways to exit the theater. But the ones that I saw, they were not happy. They were like scoffing.
Really?
It's All About Eve is so it's melodramatic for the time. Now imagine 2016.
Oh, I love it. I can quote that movie until the end of time.
Doesn't your wife love that movie?
Oh, she totally, absolutely adores it. It's going to be a bumpy ride. You were too short for that gesture. I love all that stuff. George Sanders is the best. Anyway, seriously, I mean, I love that movie. Ann Baxter. And the funny thing about that movie, as melodramatic as Ann Baxter is, she's even more melodramatic in the Ten Commandments a few years later. Oh, Moses. And the thing I love, the great connective tissue, is that remember when they did the TV movie for Hotel with James Brolin?
Yes.
Well, you know who the big matron of the hotel was in the original TV movie was Bette Davis. And when they turned it into a series, do you know who replaced Bette Davis?
Carrot Top?
Ann Baxter.
Oh, my God.
And, it's like, wow, that is just that's so meta. That's just so
I'm sure
great.
they knew that.
Of course they did. Anyway, also from Richard Lester and Michael Crawford is How I Won the War. That's also on Blu-ray from Kino Lorber.
John Lennon's in this.
John Lennon is the star, basically. Michael Crawford kind of the second star in this. Anyway, this is an anti-war satire, really an unusual movie. A lot of people really hate this film. Beautifully shot. David Watkin, who'd go on to do Chariots of Fire and many other fine films, shoots the hell out of this thing. But it's really this is Lester kind of taking his style a little bit off the beaten path, and it's kind of inaccessible. I like the film. I think it's interesting from the standpoint of Richard Lester's overall career, but it's really, really tweaked and very 60s. So, there's no reason not to pick this up along with The Knack. It just gives you a really interesting sense of where Richard Lester's style from the era, works and where it didn't work so much. Double feature from Shout Factory, two Bo Derek films, Bolero and Ghosts Can't Do It. You know what? Neither of these is very good. But Bolero has a weird kind of cult feel because it came right after Tarzan, and Tarzan, of course, came right after 10. And this is when she was pretty much making films only for her husband, John Derek, who was just directing basically softcore movies with, his latest look-alike wife. John Derek, of course, previously had been married to Linda Evans and to What's her name? The other one from the Bond film.
Star Wars.
No. See, I'm totally drawing a blank. Anyway, all three of them looked alike. My father had taught John Derek. I'm almost embarrassed to admit. John Derek, another veteran of the Ten Commandments, played Joshua in the Ten Commandments, and I also remember my father cringing at his performance in that movie, as if he had forgotten everything that he was taught.
See, Joshua sounds like
Ursula Andress. That's the other wife.
That's it. She was hot. See, Joshua sounds like a biblical name.
Yeah.
Josh, not so much.
Not so much. No.
You just take those two letters off, and somehow it just becomes like a cool surfer skateboarder kid name. Joshua, biblical. Josh, not so much.
Not so much. Anyway.
Thank you, everyone.
Ghosts Can't Do It from 1990 with Anthony Quinn is really not very good. It's got a whole supernatural element to it, and Bo Derek ultimately really can't act very well. And by 1990, that well had pretty much run dry. And then the last one on the Kino Lorber Classics front is a Robert Shaw, Malcolm McDowell film called Figures in a Landscape from 1970. A war film that is pretty standard for the period, but it's it's not anything amazing. It's just kind of a showcase for those two actors in particular. What's always interesting is to see who directs a lot of these things by the 1970s, and this is directed by the most unlikely director for this film, which is Joseph Losey, an American director who basically made his career directing great British films like The Servant. And it's really kind of it wants to be an allegory. Essentially, the Robert Shaw and Malcolm McDowell are fugitives in some kind of imaginary country, torn by some kind of imaginary conflict, and it feels a little bit like Fear and Desire on the one hand, a little bit like The Prisoner on the other. It's kind of in that same vein, which was I guess a bit of a thing in the 1970s. It feels a little bit. Also, you know what? There's like a helicopter showdowns thing, and it feels a little bit like the truck in the Spielberg film Duel. Thank you. So it's got a little. It feels like all that stuff, and it's not really very Joseph Losey like, but it's an oddity. It's a curiosity, and it's worth checking out. I can't say that I really liked it all that much, but it's kind of compelling in a strange way, and the photography is lovely. I have to say, it's really very nicely shot. So there it is. That's Figures in a Landscape.
It's a curiosity. Oh, wait, from 1952, we have one of the great, kind of forgotten film noirs, Kansas City Confidential. This starred John Payne, who, by the way, the guy was like Juilliard-trained singer, so the guy was like the real deal, although he's not necessarily singing here. Payne he plays an ex-con, and he's a delivery man, and he is framed for $1 million armored car robbery. That was all set up by this ex-cop, played by Preston Forrester. This movie is mainly remembered because it supposedly inspired Quentin Tarantino to write Reservoir Dogs. Now, no one really knows if that's true or not. No one's actually read a quote from Tarantino saying that.
So many movies that inspired him, because you can say that about Pelham 123. He's also cited the.
Well, last week we talked about Lady Snowbird.
And Lady Snowbird. Well, I mean, but specific to Reservoir Dogs, there's a huge chunk of that's also ripped off straight from the end of Ringo Lam's City on Fire. So, I mean, he borrows from everything and just kind of makes a mishmash of it.
But still, it's a good film, and it's very noirish, and all the noir cliches, that even though they're all cliched, all hard-boiled and harsh lighting and whatnot, it works here. Kansas City Confidential, I think this movie needs to be resurrected from the forgotten realms of noir history. Good stuff. Better stuff, ladies and gentlemen, is the hilarious Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead.
I like this.
Oh, it's funny.
Tom Stoppard, man.
It's Tom Stoppard. This is... It's Tim Roth and Gary Oldman. Now, this movie's old, man. It's from 1990. I think it's 25 years old. So it's like Gary Oldman and Tim Roth, 25 years ago. They played Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, two minor characters from Hamlet, who are resurrected to be like the main characters of this movie. And part of Stoppard's thing is that there are these two minor characters who are just inflated into the star of it was a play originally, then it became a movie, and it's got this hilarious absurdist bent. I mean, there's so many funny lines, so many crazy absurdist, like Waiting for Godot, Samuel Beckett type lines in this thing. It's like there's one I remember was like It's like a man talking sense to himself is no matter than a man talking nonsense not to himself. He's stark raving sane.
Cool.
Just crazy lines like that like you're like, what does that mean? And
It's awesome.
It's just really funny.
It's Stoppard just being Stoppardy.
Let me tell you something. Pirates can happen to anyone.
It's the best. The best.
I think this movie's just terrific.
Really,
and you know
it's
what?
really underrated. It's super underrated.
25th anniversary. There's interviews with Gary Oldman, Tim Roth, and Richard Dreyfuss in this thing. He's also in the film. And Tom Stoppard wrote it and directed it. He also obviously wrote the play. So I think this thing will be I think you're. By the way, this thing won the Golden Lion at the Venice Film Festival that year. So this is not just some little movie.
No.
So I would highly recommend checking out the absurdist, crazy comedy. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead.
Sweet. And then we've got a few DVDRs here from Warner Brothers and 20th Century Fox. The Warner Archive titles: Two Guys from Texas and Two Guys from Milwaukee. Pretty great. Dennis Morgan and Jack Carson aren't really known anymore, but they did some shtick back in the day, and it's okay. It's sort of a weird bygone bit that they did. But they were a good team, and there's some kind of compelling stuff to most of them. I guess you could say they were in a way kind of a second-tier Hope and Crosby of sorts. Obviously never really ascended to great fame, but there are some very, very good people involved in kind of supporting their effort here, especially in Two Guys from Milwaukee, which is a script that was co-written by Izzy Diamond, IAL Diamond, the Billy Wilder's famous collaborator, who also collaborated on Two Guys from Texas. But you really, really see his influence here because he was the rewriter here, and the original screenplay by Charles Hoffman had a good thing to it, like a good structure. But Diamond came in and clearly just kind of polished this thing up and gave it all kinds of really, really great ins and outs. Some wonderful supporting performances. It's as far as comedies from the era goes, it's not one of the best, but it's certainly memorable. 1946 deserves to be watched. If you're a fan of the era, you will definitely enjoy this. It's got all kinds of kind of great little farcical situations and good stuff. Two Guys from Texas, a little bit less engaging. I think partly because it's in color. It just feels, it just doesn't have the same feel. Once a lot of these films become color, they kind of lose something. You don't get quite carried away to the same degree. And it's also a Western, so it doesn't quite work. And it also gets there's some kind of weird crossover stuff in here. Like there's even a Bugs Bunny animated dream sequence here, that they use to kind of do a little cross promotion from Warner Brothers. It felt a little odd. So I mean, it kind of pushes a little too far in Two Guys from Texas, but still an interesting comedy duo. Dennis Morgan and Jack Carson, definitely worth checking out. And the last Warner Archive title here is Anne of Green Gables with Anne Shirley. This is the original RKO radio variation or interpretation of this, which I think this is technically the first film. Was there a silent film, Anne of Green Gables? I want to say there was a silent take on this at a certain point.
I do not know.
You're not an Anne of Green Gables fan, huh?
Not in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, 1934. I mean, the recent television version of this is the one that most people know. But you know what? Anne Shirley does a really, really wonderful job, and it just captures the whole feel of the book in a wonderful, wonderful way. It's very nostalgic, carries you away. It was the heyday of RKO. This is just shortly after Citizen Kane. So this is, RKO really in their studio heyday, and it's kind of sad that RKO doesn't really exist anymore. That's a studio, you look at the stuff they made, I would love for them to still be around.
It's like Hammer Studios. You know how they resurrected Hammer Studios like 5 years ago?
Yeah, they resurrected it with Matt's film.
Yeah, let the right one in.
Let the right one, or let me in.
Let me in,
yeah.
And then where'd that go?
Yeah, it didn't go anywhere.
No.
Because then they fired, what's his face and what's his bucket, the two guys.
What's his face and what's his bucket?
Yeah. Anyway, and then real quickly, some 20th Century Fox DVD-Rs. They have re-released Dangerous Beauty, which was previously out on DVD. This is a great film directed by Marshall Herskovitz, the other part of 30-something. Ed Zwick went on to have a huge, huge career as a director. Marshall Herskovitz, not so much, even though he's made two films that I think are better than everything that Edswick has ever made. He made Jack the Bear, which is not on Blu-ray, and it makes me sick, with Danny DeVito, which I think is an amazing movie.
That's not the one. What,
Danny DeVito as the single father and the kid. It's an amazing film.
What was the Francis Ford Coppola one that was with Robin Williams? That was like the bear.
Jack. That's just Jack. Yeah, no, Jack the Bear with Danny DeVito as a single father. It's an amazing movie. It is so good.
It's called Jack the Bear. Wade. No one's gonna. It's just stupid.
I know. And then anyway, he went on to do Dangerous Beauty, which was produced by Arnon Milchan and Edswick, of course, but which features and actually it's based on a true story, to be honest. But it's absolutely wonderful. Features Catherine McCormack and Rufus Sewell in amazing performances. This thing should have gotten heaps of Oscar nominations. It didn't. I don't know why. But Janine Dominy wrote an amazing script here and should have gotten an Oscar nomination as well. Anyway, I mean, it's basically a period film about a very famous 16th century courtesan who becomes like kind of a feminist icon in her era. I mean, Catherine McCormack kills it in this film. And then less interesting are a bunch of old Fox programmers. Bad Boy by Vina Del Mar, starring James Dunn. Let me just name these off for you real quickly. 4 Men and a Prayer, which has, it's okay. It's got George Sanders and David Niven in it, which is, kind of boost the thing a little bit. It's a British story set during the Raj in India. It's okay. It happened in Flatbush, which was directed by Ray McCary. The only thing that makes this interesting is that it's got an interesting cast of kind of second-tier people, including William Frawley, future of Fred Mertz on the I Love Lucy show. The Peace Killers from 1971, a little bit of a kind of a B movie, a hippie commune thing, from the late biker era. It's kind of not helter skelter, but clearly trying to capitalize on all of that stuff. Avalanche from 1967, which is one of those late 60s human drama things, all about a bunch of people who have to sort of cooperate when an avalanche traps them. And then lastly, really, really good trash, Committed. Committed is cheesy, and it's got way too many really bad hairstyles, but it's one of those early 90s kind of mid-level schlock movies that somehow just works because everything is so cheesy and everybody takes it so seriously, and it's just so absolutely ridiculous. It's about a nurse who is deceived into getting herself committed into a mental institution and winds up basically being the only sane person there, and fill in the blanks. It winds up almost being comical. So good times. Good times with the DVD-R stuff, the MOD manufacture on demand world, which hopefully we'll be able to cover a little bit more in the future.
Wait, In the Basement is a movie.
It's a documentary. We're talking about docs now, by the way, folks.
Well, documentaries are movies.
Movies are docs. Docs are movies.
This is a really creepy but oddly mesmerizing little documentary about these people who have these basements and they deck them out and all this crazy stuff that like services their hobbies and a lot of times their fetishes. And, it's just, you meet the weirdest people. There's this guy who loves Hitler and he has a band, like a brass band. And there's it's just a lot of curiosities in here. The people who love like ornate bathrooms and they paint them red, and it's just really crazy people, and it really makes you know what's funny is that when you read these horrible stories about almost like the real life Room, where you read about these poor people who've been kidnapped and they were held in a basement for 17 years, like that guy in Germany or Norway, wherever that was, or pretty much the real version of Room.
Sure.
You think to yourself, what is going on in the basements of America? What is happening behind these closed doors? You really start to wonder, between Room and something like In the Basement, you really get to realize that we're horrible people. We are just horrible, twisted people.
I mentioned last week when I was listening to Patton Oswalt driving into to radio at KPCC, and he even mentions that in part of his routine, where he talks about this is the kind of thing that you would say to a woman that you have in a pit in your basement, where you're lowering down
like Silence of the Lambs.
Water. Yeah, it's truly it's kind of sick and twisted. The fact that just goes on. It's not just something that happens once or twice or 3 times. It seems to happen all the time. You wonder. Okay, we find out about these things whenever somebody escapes or whenever one of them is revealed. Honestly, how many people are there in America
right now
who are being held in human slavery in some kind of a dungeon or in some kind of a lockdown house, creepy house, or in a backyard where there's some kind of a bunker? I mean, how many of these are there?
There's got to be at least a dozen. You figure somewhere in a country of 300 million people.
Way too many, bottom line.
Well, one is way too many, but you got to figure.
But who are the neighbors who are just like, those people are kind of weird, and they're just not paying attention? Like, seriously, like that whole thing in Cleveland?
I know.
That Castro guy? Like,
yeah.
Dude, seriously, that was on a busy street. The windows were all boarded up. What were the neighbors thinking? Did you not think something kind of creepy going on in there?
How did you remember that guy's name?
Because it was Castro. How do you forget that?
I did.
It's not like it's not an unusual name. There's a famous dictator with the same last name.
Obama? Oh, I got political there, and now I'm going to get letters, even though I was just going for the easy joke. Okay. Anyway, In the Basement, it's fascinating, twisted stuff.
So here's the documentary that is widely considered the front runner for the Oscar and the big deal. Is The Look of Silence by Joshua Oppenheimer.
This is a great movie. Great. Loved it.
Blu-ray from Draft House.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is. And of course, this is kind of his follow-up to the Oscar-nominated The Act of Killing, which is why they're likely to give him the Oscar, because The Act of Killing did not win the Oscar. This, of course, deals in the same subject matter, which is the 1965 Indonesian genocide, and whereas the previous film was very much about the perpetrators, this one kind of focuses on the victims, and it's a very different film. It's very differently put together. I think this is, in most respects, a better film. My only problem with Oppenheimer's films is that he doesn't quite get the Indonesian history right, and he doesn't try to, which I think is unfortunate. And he contends that it's sort of irrelevant. But I know a little bit about all that stuff because I'm a huge fan of The Year of Living Dangerously and that whole period. So it matters to me a little bit more. But that being said, it is a profoundly humanistic and touching film. It is very difficult to watch, but it is he's a fine filmmaker, and he's put together 2 amazing films that really together stand as kind of the epic delineation of that particular period. I don't think they should be the final word, but they definitely are conversation starters, and I think that's worth everything. So, The Look of Silence is quite a superb film, and produced by 2 guys who should know, Werner Herzog and Errol Morris. We should point out they slapped their names on this thing to give it a little extra push, and bravo, well done. So that is a great Blu-ray from Draft House, and a good-looking Blu-ray, I should add too. I mean, really, docs often don't try hard enough, but that one's quite nice. And then a couple others here that I'll go through right quickly. Hate Crimes in the Heartland, as long as we're on uplifting and happy subject matter. Hate Crimes in the Heartland is a musical. It's heartwarming and wonderful and lovely. No, not at all. This basically goes to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and focuses on 2 separate hate crimes that are divided by almost 100 years. And it sort of compares them and contrasts them and looks at the history that connects them. It's really kind of goes to the root of what is going on in other communities that have similar problems and similar issues. Directed by Rachel Lyon, it is a very, very ambitious film. It has a premise, obviously, that requires a lot of work to actually make that connection, to make it stick. She's making a case that is pretty elaborate, and she does a good job. It's a very, very fine film. So I like that she aimed high and quite nearly achieves everything that she shoots for. And then Turn Toward the Sun is more uplifting. This is about the extraordinary life, as it says in the tagline, the extraordinary life of Michael Byrne, MC. If you don't know who Michael Byrne was a writer, a poet, a really remarkable kind of laureate figure in Britain, And he came from a really interesting line. His father had worked in Buckingham Palace, and he wound up being I don't want to give anything away, but he wound up having some interesting his private life became a bit of a Cold War sensation as well, and he wound up having just really a bizarre kind of spy life in many respects. I mean, his what he did in World War II and thereafter, and he even wound up saving a very famous actress's life. And I won't say anything else because all of these are twists and turns that are just extraordinary, and you would have no idea that this strange guy intersected with so many. This just a talented but very unusual figure intersected with so many great historical events and people. So that is called Turned Toward the Sun, The Extraordinary Life of Michael Byrne, MC. And MC doesn't mean he's a rapper, by the way. I just wanted to...
Yo.
Yeah.
From PBS, Iwo Jima, From Combat to Comrades. I was really taken by this wonderful documentary where it takes veterans from both sides, the American and the Japanese side, and they send them back to Iwo Jima to sort of have a reunion. In fact, they wound up calling it, I think, a reunion of honor, what they wind up calling it. But there's a U.S. documentary crew following around 3 survivors. There's a Japanese crew documenting the only actually Japanese survivor able to make the trip to Iwo Jima. And so, it's this amazing time capsule, 1945, and, there was like 90,000 people who fought in Iwo Jima for X number of weeks, and it was just harrowing for all of them. And now they're sort of, 60 years, whatever it is later, they're now, reuniting at the place where it all happened, and it's just very poignant and very emotional, and it's a very powerful documentary. Iwo Jima, From Combat to Comrades. It really goes to show you that when a lot of times when both sides come together for war, it's just these average folks who really have nothing against each other. The average Japanese soldier had nothing against John Q, American soldier, and John Q, American soldier, had nothing against Japanese soldier. But this is what we're at war, and this is what their superior officers told them to do. So they're going to do it because they don't want to die. But there's no reason why they can't get together and break bread.
It's fantastic. And also from PBS, 2 great frontline docs. I don't know that there's ever been a bad frontline doc. These people just bat 1,000 every single time. One of them is Inside Assad's Syria, which is, for the life of me, the only thing that's more incredible than how good these things are is how quickly they put them together, especially when the subject matter is just so relevant, so right now. It's like, something happens 48 hours ago, and then 2 days from now, there's like this feature-length frontline documentary that is just, how do you even come? I mean, I don't understand how you even shot that in that period of time.
Because they caused it to happen.
There you see,
it. So they were producing the documentary as they were causing the events to happen.
That's it. Well, anyway, we're all familiar, obviously, with the events going on right now in Syria and Iraq. It's on the news every day. And everything that we read about in the news is kind of put under a spotlight in this hour-long frontline doc, Inside Assad's Syria, which is chilling and heartbreaking and disturbing, and does not make you feel better in any way whatsoever, but it is illuminating. It will make you more intelligent in conversations. So don't read all your clickbait. Watch a doc like this, and you will be more informed. The other one is My Brother's Bomber, another front line. This one, obviously, they had more time to put together. This deals with basically the guy who made this, Ken Dornstein, he lost his brother in the Lockerbie bombing, the Lockerbie Pan Am 747 bombing crash over Lockerbie, Scotland, and he's never been able to let it go. So this is a rather extraordinary 3-hour-long frontline documentary about his his investigation into the crash that killed his brother and what happened and who did it and how he pieces this mystery together. And the fact that it is from the brother of a survivor makes it, yes, it's certainly a very personal point of view, but he's so dogged and so determined and so unrelenting that it drags you into it, and it starts to feel not even like a doc. It starts to feel like a great Jean Le Carré novel or something. It really is just incredible. Despite the length, it just moves like gangbusters. It's just beautiful. So My Brother's Bomber, really one of the best things that Frontline has shown, I think, perhaps ever. It's really, really first rate. And then the last one from PBS is Cyber War Threat, Navigating the New and Deadly Digital Battlefield. This is a Nova episode that's about an hour long. It gets very technical and kind of lost me at a certain point, but it definitely makes you a little bit afraid of what's going on the internet, and it makes you just want to throw your computer out and go full Luddite and just live in your parents' basement and really not have any internet connection to the world. And then that lasts until somebody texts you a picture of their butt, and then you immediately forget about the cyber war threat.
I like butt texts.
Yeah. Anyway, but it is worth checking out. A lot of you will have more technical know-how, and you'll understand a lot of the nuances of this better. But anyway, it's kind of chilling. I hope it doesn't come to pass, but it certainly seems to.
For the doctor in your family or somebody who's maybe going through some medical issues, interesting documentary called Making Rounds. This is directed by Muffy Meyer. Name really Muffy. That's just terrible. That sounds so like Upper East Side. Anyway, co-director of Great Gardens and New Medicine. Very interesting documentary, very illuminating. It's about the lost art of the bedside manner, the lost art of doctors, just like back in the day, where they would diagnose you based on one thing, which is coming into your hospital room and listening to the patient. What is the issue? They don't just throw you on a machine. They don't just run you through like a mill. And in order to prove that point, the director profiles these two cardiologists at Mount Sinai Hospital over a month period, and you see them in the cardiac care unit, and they make their rounds and they talk to the patient. They get a sense of what they're like. They put their gloves on and they sort of, give it the personal touch. And it's very refreshing. And it's obviously today medical advancements are amazing. So I wouldn't necessarily want people to be diagnosed just based on the doctor putting on gloves and touching your throat. But there's something to be said about these doctors who don't treat the medical profession like just a mill, like my primary care physician does, just saying, where just like you've got 6 minutes and you're in and you're out. These guys are caring doctors. They're good doctors. They're at Mount Sinai. And this documentary, Making Rounds, really makes you long for the days when the human touch was just the most important thing in diagnosing a patient. So it has limited appeal, but if you're into it, you really enjoy Making Rounds.
If you're into prison escapes and anime, you will want to check out One Piece Season 7 Voyage 4. This thing just keeps on going with its wild and crazy animation and its fantastical, phantasmagorical and psychedelic stories. I've never tried to really understand this world. You got characters named, freaking Monkey and Rubber Man and Buggy the Clown. It is what it is, and it's a crazy, crazy thing, but it's popular, and it's not on Blu-ray. It's only on DVD. Never understood that. Anyway, One Piece Season 7 Voyage 4 is out. A few other anime things before we close the show out. Fairy Tail, Volume 18 is also out. That's another hugely, hugely popular series from Funimation. This is actually a lot more accessible. I don't quite understand this world either. The politics of it is very, very confusing to me, but it's fantastic animation, really, really great. And there's some especially really cool stuff here. I scanned this rather quickly and just marveled at the animation. Didn't even matter what the stories were. We've got if you're a Gundam fan, we got a ton of Gundam. Isn't that you like how that sounds? Ton of Gundam.
Ton of gum?
Ton of Gundam. I got here Gundam Earthlight and Moon Butterfly. This is from Turn of Gundam The Movies. Fantastic animation. Also got a Gundam movie trilogy. This is Mobile Suit Gundam, which is feels very transformery. This is from the Right Stuff anime company. Right Stuff, one of the premier distributors of anime. And then the coolest one here is Mobile Suit Gundam Collection 2, which is on Blu-ray. And this is classic. Anytime classic anime winds up on Blu-ray, I always try to take a peek because classic anime is very elegant, but it's very rough. And you always want to see what the Blu-ray, what the high def reveals in it. And what it reveals is that these guys just work their butts off to make the stuff look cool. So you really do start to see, as our friend and colleague Ray Green often says, you start to see the fingerprints. And that's what he wants to see. It's like when you watch Wallace and Gromit, you actually see the fingerprints in the clay. And there's something really kind of cool and organic and reassuring about that. You start to really appreciate the effort much more than you do with something that's entirely computer generated. Anyway, but this is really terrific. So these are all new transfers from original 35 millimeter, and it shows. It is just beautiful. It is classic anime. It is wonderful. That's Mobile Suit Gundam Collection 2. And then, let's see, a lovely set here. This is Sailor Moon, for those who enjoy the whole little girl fetishistic thing that goes on. Sailor Moon is kind of for pervy old men in many respects. This is a six disc set, the complete Sailor Moon Season 2. And it's Blu-ray and DVD. This is from Viz, and she's blonde, and she wears that cute little outfit with the blue mini skirt.
I don't understand the whole Sailor Moon thing. I don't understand the fetish. I don't understand the appeal.
The red boots. It's all about the red boots. The red knee-high boots.
Red knee-high boots are sexy. I get it.
Yeah.
But there's look, I've been to Japan. Yeah. I'm telling you, those people are nuts.
Sailor Moon is everywhere.
Nuts.
By the way. Yeah.
And so is Hello Kitty.
She's great. She's fantastic. Tons of extras here. I mean, you get behind the scenes on how they dub it and how they do the songs, and there's cast interviews, and this thing's really, really loaded up. So for a single season Blu-ray and DVD set, this thing is really, really quite loaded. But this is actually I should say Sailor Moon R. There's several Sailor Moon series, so this is season 2 of Sailor Moon R. I'm not.
R stands for Rubenesque.
Yeah.
She's a fat Sailor Moon. Yeah. If you're into that kind of thing.
And quickly wrapping this out, Riddle, Story of Devil, Akumba, No Riddle. This is another Funimation set. As very often is the case with these things, I try to sort of get caught up, and I just can't. This is based on a manga that's apparently very, very popular. Riddle, Story of Devil. It deals with female assassins in a boarding school and this weird kind of murder game. But there's obviously more going on here, and I've never read the manga, and I'm not about to. But it's not as exploitative as you might necessarily think. It's got something on its mind. And then let's see real quickly. The Prince. Hold on. I'm gonna skip that, and I'm gonna go. We only got time for one more here. Let's go with the complete collection, Majestic Prince. This is 24 episodes on 4 discs from the Sente line of Section 23. And this is just a really cool kind of futuristic alien attack defending the Earth kind of thing. It's in the vein of all those great sci-fi series like Star Blazers and many other fine anime series. A lot more accessible because these things it's great. It's kind of in the world of Star Wars, and anime does that really, really well. So check it out. This complete collection of Majestic Prince. Cool artwork, really cool animation, a lot of fun, and you don't have to kind of read entire volumes on the politics of any particular anime world to really get into it. So
very important.
Very, very important.
Because my time is valuable, Wade.
Honestly, some of those anime sagas, I don't know how you even start, and it's like it's like Lord of the Rings, these huge elaborate worlds with so much backstory, and
What do you think about Avatar 2 being delayed? Aren't you kind of happy?
Yeah, they blinked. they blinked. They don't want to go up against Star Wars, which pretty much tells you they know that Avatar has faded from the pop culture consciousness.
It was never in the. It's bizarre. That movie is the highest grossing film of all time, and nobody cares.
It's not going to be for very long.
Nobody wears Avatar.
No.
Can you even name a character in that movie?
No.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
Nobody
cares.
It's totally bizarre.
And I think what's even scarier is that it's got they're going to do 3 movies back to back to back. So they're going to get Avatar 2, 3, and 4. If Avatar 2 comes out and winds up basically being a gigantic egg, if it just sits and lays there and people are like, oh my gosh, this is just, if it just winds up tanking so horribly, what's 20th Century Fox going to do? They've got 2 more that they have to release. And to stay on good terms with James Cameron, that means you are not just, you've spent your production money, but that means you've got $250,000 in marketing that you are going to flush down the toilet to try to boost a couple of films that nobody wants to see.
That is correct. Well, I can't see it. Well, Avatar 2 won't bomb, but Avatar 3 will bomb if Avatar 2 sucks.
There you go. Anyway, well, that's it. We'll see you guys next week.